justice and health, and the review of the updated land use plan. My name is Kimberly Ruddens. I'm principal planner here at the City of Ontario, leading the Ontario Plan Update effort. And I'm under the direction and guidance of our planning director, Rudy Zeladon. Tonight, our team, which includes both the city staff and our consultant Placeworks, led by Brian Jodd, principal in charge, and Colin Drunker, project manager, are holding a second workshop providing a project process update, overview of the updated land use plan, and an overview of what we want to do in the future of the plan, focusing on identifying issues related to environmental justice and health through an interactive survey online. We encourage your participation throughout the process to share your ideas and information on how we can improve the City of Ontario, and also to encourage your fellow citizens to go to our website and get involved. And that's at www.ontarioplan/TOP2050. The following presentation and survey will be an opportunity to further share your thoughts and views, and also provide us with potential future implementation policies. The workshop is being recorded and posted on the website. We will have Spanish translation as part of it. So once again, we thank you for being here, and we'll provide an opportunity for Spanish translation now. And then I will have Colin Drunker present the TOP 2050 presentation. Thank you very much.
Bienvenidos o buenas tardes. Hoy vamos a discutir el Plan de Ontario 2050, actualización técnica, taller número 2. Y hoy vamos a enfocar en justicia de ambiente y salud y el plan de terreno actualizado preferido. Hoy, uno de los planificadoras de nuestra ciudad es Kimberly Ruddens, el planeador principal de la ciudad de Ontario, y va a dirigir el plan de Ontario 2050 bajo la dirección de nuestro director Rudy Zeladon. Esta noche nuestro equipo, que incluye el personal y consultor Placeworks, bajo la dirección de Brian Judd, principal encargo, y Colin Drucker, el gerente de proyecto, van a resumir este taller número 2 y van a hablar del proceso del proyecto y la descripción del plan preferido de terreno. Nuestra enfocación va a ser en buscando asuntos relacionados de justicia de ambiente y salud sobre un encuentro electrónica.
All right. Thank you. Again, my name is Colin Drucker with Placeworks, the primary consultant assisting the city, and I'll be leading tonight's presentation. Again, tonight's presentation will be recorded, in both English and Spanish versions will be made available on the city's website. And we encourage everyone to tell their fellow residents who cannot attend tonight to visit the website and view tonight's recording. Tonight's presentation will be conducted in English and Spanish. If you have not already done so and wish to hear the presentation conducted in Spanish, please see the instructions on the screen. If you're on a computer, you'll click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and then select Spanish and mute original audio. If you are joining us through your smartphone, please press on the More button and select Language Interpretation. Robert?
Esta presentación va a estar una versión en español. Si no miran el botón que dice clic, interpretación, también puede buscar en las opciones más y puede escoger español o español, y Y déjenos saber en el chat si tienen problemas buscando esa opción.
All right, after a brief overview of this effort and the topic of environmental justice, we will ask you a series of questions to obtain greater understanding of the community's issues and concerns. For those who cannot attend tonight's meeting or unable to answer the questions, all questions asked can also be answered through the online survey posted on the city's website. And again, we encourage everyone to tell their fellow residents who cannot attend to visit the website and view tonight's recording and take the survey. Tonight's meeting is being conducted virtually to ensure the safety and comfort of all in attendance, and so the meeting can be more easily recorded and
Just
viewed.
a moment.
Oh, yes.
Our Spanish translator is muted,
Oh, okay.
so we might need to repeat a little bit.
I will go back. Let me go back to, I will go back to this, and I'll start over with this.
Todas las preguntas hechas esta noche por la ciudad también pueden ser respondidas a través de una descuento en línea.
Okay. After a brief overview of this effort and the topic of environmental justice, we will ask you a series of questions to obtain greater understanding of the community's issues and concerns. For those who cannot attend tonight's meeting or unable to answer the questions, all questions can be answered through an online survey posted on the city's website. Again, we encourage everyone to tell their fellow residents who cannot attend tonight to visit the website, view tonight's recording, and take the survey. Tonight's meeting is being conducted virtually to ensure the safety and comfort of all in attendance, and so the meeting can be more easily recorded and viewed by those unable to attend or those interested in reviewing the material.
Nuestra cita hoy va a ser virtual para que toda la gente en su casa anden a salvo y no se tengan que preocupar de enfermarse.
And I think Robert, probably from this point on, I think we can rely on the Spanish channel. But if anybody does have any concerns about or desire to get onto the Spanish channel, please let us know in the chat. Okay, if you have comments or questions during the presentation, we will address as many as we can during the Q&A portions of the meeting. To ensure we can answer as many questions as possible tonight and to facilitate a bilingual process, we will be taking comments and questions through Zoom's chat function. If you're on a computer, click on the chat button at the bottom of your screen and then write your comment or question in the space where it says type message here. If you're joining us through your tablet or smartphone, please press on the More button and select Chat. So why are we here tonight?
Just a moment, Colin.
Yes.
We have a bunch of people who are having difficulty joining the chat, I believe, or joining the Zoom call.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Are we
So-
hearing that through the chat, or difficulty with the Spanish channel, or is it just getting to the meeting?
Yes, it's difficulty logging in. So if you guys, if anybody has people texting them about how to join, if you go to the ontarioplan.org TOP 2050 website, you should be able to click on the right underneath where it says Community Workshop number 2 in big red text. 2 lines below there is a link to the Zoom. And that should take you directly to our meeting tonight, and you shouldn't require a passcode, but if it does ask for a passcode, that is listed on the line directly below that link.
And so maybe Robert, if you could not necessarily obviously word for word, but just repeat how people can inform others of how to join the meeting.
Sure. So, si tienen problemas atendiendo la cita virtual, el link para meterse la cita está en el ontarioplan.org/TOP TOP 2050 y va a ser un link para meterse dentro de Zoom. Y si hacen clic ese link, no van a necesitar un código, lo va a llevar a la cita direccional. Pero si tienen amigas que no pueden meterse en el chat, en la cita, ponlo en el chat y podemos esperar un ratito más para que todos puedan atender.
Okay. Great. Well, that's unfortunate to hear that some are having difficulty, but I'm glad that there are those who keep trying to attend, and please continue to encourage people to join in. If it is later in the session, they should still join in and they will still be able to answer the questions. And if there's any concern, they can always take the survey afterwards. I will go ahead and start on this slide, but if there's any issues, everyone can feel free to interrupt again. So why are we here tonight? The city is updating the Ontario plan to include goals, policies, and programs to address the issue of environmental justice. And tonight, we will present information about environmental justice, what it means for Ontario, and what we have already heard from the community. Then, most importantly, we need your help to identify the issues of greatest concern in your neighborhoods. What is the Ontario plan? For those who don't know, the Ontario plan is the city's policy and implementation framework that guides the long-term growth and improvement of the Ontario community. Please visit the city's website to see fact sheets, PDF and web maps, and information on key topics. Recording of Workshop 1 is also available and provides an overview of the Ontario plan and the update effort in English and Spanish. First, I will provide a snapshot of the key work done to date, including a summary of outreach conducted to date and what we have heard so far from the community and key stakeholders. Next, to get everyone familiar with the polling function that will be used later to collect your thoughts on environmental justice issues and concerns, we will ask you a simple question about where you live. Answering this question also helps us understand where the issues and concerns you raise are found in Ontario. I will then provide an overview of environmental justice and illustrate our initial areas of concern based on data from a state mapping tool called Cal EnviroScreen. I will also ask you to indicate whether these areas are correct or if we should expand our focus onto other parts of Ontario. Following that, I will briefly discuss the 6 key topics identified in state law related to environmental justice. For each topic, we will post a series of questions designed to collect the community's input about the specific issues and concerns you have or are facing. We will also answer a few questions from the audience on each topic. After the listed topics are addressed, we will ask you whether there are other issues we should consider and better understand. We will also post a series of questions so that we can better understand the demographics of our audience, who we are reaching, and who is providing input. Finally, we will use the remaining time to open the meeting to address questions about the Ontario plan and the topic of environmental justice. Tonight's meeting is a continuation of an ongoing conversation between the city and the community. Between 2018 and 2020, the city has conducted community outreach on a number of topics to be addressed in the update of the Ontario plan. The community raised numerous issues that overlap or relate directly to environmental justice during these efforts, such as the ongoing Ontario Together effort, the development of master plans for active transportation and parks and recreation, and evaluation of resources and efforts to create safer, more affordable, and more equitable housing options. In 2021, the city engaged key stakeholders on a variety of topics, including environmental justice, and additional outreach will take place later in the summer and through public hearings in 2022. Shown here are common themes for the issues raised in previous outreach. Residents want more affordable and safer places. from housing to parks to roads to the air we breathe. But we know there are more issues, especially related to environmental justice, and we want to hear from you. Based in large part on the previous outreach and planning efforts, the update of the Ontario Plan started in 2020 with a focus on evaluating existing conditions and developing a housing strategy to address state mandates. We are now conducting additional engagement, finalizing the land use plan, refining city policies, and initiating the environmental review process. Later in the year, we will be creating new design standards, updating the city's climate action plan, preparing implementation strategies, and advancing key technologies. We anticipate getting to the adoption process later next year, with the housing element being updated in advance to comply with state deadlines. This is a map of the current land use plan. The city looked at how to change the land use plan, driven by 4 primary considerations: to accommodate more than 20,000 housing units as required by state law, to better align with current economic conditions, and to incorporate input from property owners and from stakeholders consistent with the city's vision. Here you can see the full land use plan. And the next slide I will go to, and Ricky, I'm going to deviate just a little bit here. The next slide I will go to will show the extent of the proposed land use changes that will be studied to ensure environmental impacts, traffic considerations, and infrastructure needs are all properly understood. So here is where you can see the extent of the land use changes being proposed to comply with state deadlines and address input. An interactive version of this map will be available on the city's website, allowing you to zoom into specific areas and parcels and identify whether a parcel's land use is being proposed for change, as well as the reason for the proposed change. Now, to get everyone familiar with the polling function that will be used later to collect your thoughts on environmental justice issues and concerns, we will ask you a simple question about where you live. Answering this question also helps us understand where the issues and concerns you raise are found in Ontario. As Ontario is a large city, we have divided the map into 4 quadrants. Here is the first quadrant. If you do not live in this area, please select the last choice. If you do not live in the city, please select the area about which you want to answer questions. So Hallie, you can go ahead and launch the poll. And we have a couple of you who have answered the question. We're starting to get some more answers. If you are having any issues trying to access the poll, please let us know in the chat. That's one of the reasons why we do some of these simple polls in the beginning, just to ensure that people are able to use it and access the technology. We've got 4 folks who have answered. And this is optional, obviously. I will, unless others are indicating, and I can ask either Hallie or Lynette to indicate whether or not folks are having any issues with the Zoom poll. We've got kind of 5, 6, oh, we're starting to maybe pick up. Let's see, Hallie, are you seeing anything in the chat, or Lynette, are you seeing anything in the chat indicating that there's any issues with the Zoom polling?
No, I have not noticed.
Okay. Well, I think if those of you who do not wish to take the poll, that's fine. And I'll go ahead and go to the next section of the city. So here is the second quadrant. Again, if you do not live in this area, please select the last choice. So Hallie, if you can launch the second quadrant poll. There we go. We have a few folks. Maybe some of them did not live in the previous area. So again, if you do not live either in the city, if you do not live in the city, then please select an area about which you would like to answer questions. If you do not live in this area of the city or do not wish to talk about it, then you can select that last answer, which is I do not live in this quadrant, or NA. All right, we have more people than voted before, so either folks are getting used to this or perhaps more are living in the area. Okay, I think we've reached the point where we can go on to the next one. So Hallie can go ahead and launch the third quadrant. So here is the third quadrant. I will repeat some sentences many times during the night. Again, if you do not live in this area, please select the last choice. And if you do not live in the city, please select the area about which you would like to answer questions. Okay, so I did get some more. I'll give another 10 seconds or so just to let people answer if they like. All right. So I'll go ahead and you can close that poll and we'll go to the next one. And here is the last quadrant. So you can go ahead and end the third quadrant poll. Let's see. Make sure Hallie heard me. Can end the third poll. There we go. And then we can start the fourth poll. This will be the southern part of the city. This is the last quadrant. If you do not live in this area, please select the last choice. This is the only question of the night where we repeat ourselves. It's simply because the city is a fairly large place. And so we're trying to ensure people can look at a screen and better understand where they are in the city. Up to 5. Give it another 10 seconds or so. And then Hallie, you can probably close the poll now. All right, so in all, it seems like we have a fairly even spread around the city. And I will now provide an overview of environmental justice. What is environmental justice? Throughout our communities, some bear a disproportionate burden of pollution and associated health risks. Environmental justice, or EJ, seeks to address this inequity by reducing pollution and increasing public investments in these communities, while also ensuring their input is considered in decisions that affect them. In 2016, a new law was passed that requires cities like Ontario to address environmental justice in their general plans. The Ontario plan must be updated to incorporate goals, objectives, and policies that will reduce health risks in disadvantaged communities, promote civic engagement in the decision-making process, and prioritize improvements and programs that address the needs of disadvantaged communities. The law requires that the city address the topics related to pollution, air quality, public facilities, greater access to healthy food, adequate housing, and programs and facilities for physical activity. This is the minimum list, but we want to know about other issues you or others face in Ontario. But before we get to questions about issues, let me talk about what defines a disadvantaged community. That term is at the heart of environmental justice. In general, the term disadvantaged community can be described as an area with residents that face the greatest combination of pollution, health, and socioeconomic issues. These areas have historically received less investment from people, businesses, and agencies, leaving residents with fewer resources and inequitable opportunities for a healthy and prosperous life. To prioritize improvements, the city must identify environmental justice communities within the city where new goals, policies, and programs address local issues and will be implemented. Cal EPA publishes Cal EnviroScreen, a tool to help identify areas that have the highest risk of exposure to pollution and population characteristics that are typically associated with disadvantaged environmental justice communities. This tool measures 21 different characteristics across every census tract in California. We will be using the latest version of this data, version 4.0, which was released just a few months ago. Based on the state's data on all 21 factors, the areas shown in red and orange are the most impacted and could be considered disadvantaged communities. However, because state law directs cities like Ontario to prioritize improvements in disadvantaged areas, we want to make sure the city's policies, efforts, and resources are focused in the areas of greatest need. The area south of the 60 freeway is orange in color, primarily due to past and present dairy operations, leading to higher risks of ground and water pollution. This part of Ontario is actively converting agricultural uses to new homes, shops, and businesses. And the development process will address and remove the potential sources of pollution. Additionally, the majority of residents that currently or will live in this area tend to have more financial resources. Because of this, our preliminary understanding of the state's data, combined with some local knowledge, indicates that the areas shown on this map should be the primary areas of focus for environmental justice policies and investments. We want to know from you, given your local knowledge and experience in Ontario, whether you agree. So Hallie, if you could launch the polling question that asks whether you agree with the environmental justice areas of focus. So again, we are asking whether or not the areas shown on this map accurately represent the areas that you think should be the focus of environmental justice policies and investments. If you do not agree, then please explain in chat what you would change. We have 5 so far, 6. We have people answering. And feel free, even if you answer yes, which is all we have as far as answers so far, even if you have answered yes and you want to contribute a comment, feel free to do so in the chat. I think we've reached the number of people who are going to vote. So I will go ahead and proceed. Thank you. I will go ahead and end the polling. As I mentioned, there are 21 different factors provided by the California EPA's tool, CalEnviroscreen. What is shown on this slide are the local issues that generate some of the greater health risks to residents in Ontario. These issues are considered local because they are directly related to certain land uses in the city or the people of Ontario. This slide lists environmental justice issues that are regional in nature. That is, they are created by land uses, economic patterns, and transportation systems that are largely outside of Ontario. And while this data provides a solid foundation to understand environmental justice issues in Ontario, we know that it is only a partial picture. The primary purpose of tonight's meeting is to obtain input from the community who lives and/or works every day in Ontario. I will now go through those 6 topics listed in previous slides and ask a series of questions to help us better understand the issues you or others encounter in the city. First up is the topic of pollution, whether it be pollution in the air, ground, or water. The city wants to work with the community to develop strategies and support regulations that will help reduce exposure to air pollution and hazardous materials. So Hallie, if you could launch the poll, we have a number of questions, 4 in total. So you can scroll down once you begin to answer the questions. I will go ahead and read the questions just in case anyone is on the phone or is otherwise interested in hearing them. First question is, are you exposed to what you would consider excessive air pollution from trucks and cars on a regular basis? The second question is, are you exposed to or do you live in close proximity to fumes, noise, and/or chemicals from industrial businesses or gas stations? Third question is, do you live, work, or recreate near sites in the city of Ontario that were polluted by past industrial uses? And the fourth question is, for homes built before 1978, they may have used harmful lead-based paint. If your home was built prior to 1978, is the home paint peeling or chipped? So these are more serious questions than our first set of questions and potentially require some additional thought. I could tell there was a certain amount of delay before people started to answer the questions, most likely because they were trying to read them and really understand some of these serious questions. So we have more activity now than we did during the initial set of questions. That's good to see. We'll offer people a little more time. While people are looking at those questions, perhaps taking more, or we can just take some time to answer some questions. So Lynette, are there any questions that relate to pollution that would be good to bring up right now?
Not yet. We do not have any questions submitted in the chat.
Okay.
Before we get into the questions too, I know that there has been some people have been having difficulty joining the webinar via the links. So if you know anybody who is stuck in a waiting room, if you could ask them to please disconnect and rejoin using either the links that we sent with everybody in the chat or the link on the website, it would be helpful. Thank you.
And perhaps, Robert, if you could repeat that sentiment.
Sure. Si todavía hay personas que están atrapados y no se pueden meter dentro de la cita, por favor usa uno de los links que tenemos en el chat. O si pueden ir a nuestra página de internet a ontarioplan.org/TOP2050 y usa ese link para meterse en el chat. Por favor, déjanos saber si todavía hay gente que no se pueden meter en la cita.
Thank you. And I will add that for those who are having trouble, well, I would imagine that is frustrating. The good news is that these are the exact same questions that are contained in the survey, and we are recording this meeting. So those who do miss the meeting, whether it's because they could not attend or they were having trouble connecting, they will be able to rewatch this meeting, fast forward through some of these parts, and answer the questions not only by the, or not necessarily in the recording, but through the survey link. So we have made sure that people will be able to answer and provide the same input, whether they are able to attend tonight or at a later time view the recording. All right, I think we have all the information we're going to get. So I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and go on to the next topic. So next is the topic of public facilities. The city wants to know how it can increase access to community health facilities, parks, community centers, and other public services and facilities, particularly in underserved areas. So, Hallie, if you can go ahead and launch the poll questions for this. We have 7 total questions here, and I will read them. I think these are simpler questions than the first set. The first question is, does your neighborhood suffer from water pollution and or dumping of trash and other items in creeks and or storm drainage areas? The second question is, are sidewalks and wheelchair ramps available in your neighborhood for all people, including those that may have special needs? Number 3, do you have convenient access to buses and other forms of public transportation? Question 4, does your neighborhood have street trees? Question 5, do you have access to healthcare services such as doctors, mental health care professionals, dentists, hospitals, or health insurance? Number 6, does your neighborhood have street lights? And number 7, do you have access to educational facilities such as schools and programs that promote lifelong learning? So there are more questions. They are substantial for people's everyday life, though not quite as serious as the questions on the pollution topic. People are beginning to answer those. While they're doing that, again, Lynette, I don't know if there are any questions people have submitted in the chat or from before that relate to public facilities. If there are, you can ask them. If not, you can.
We do not have any questions in the chat related to public facilities.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we're almost up to the number of folks who voted before. So I'll give it a few more seconds.
Someone has their hands up raised on the chat.
Okay. if you do have a question, please ask it in the chat, and we will answer it either through a direct message on the chat or as a broad message to everyone. We have one more person, I think. While our number of participants is growing, I think more people have been getting access to the meeting. That's good to see. And again, for any who just joined us, you will be able to answer these questions and any that you missed by taking the online survey that will be available on the city's website. So I'm going to go ahead and end the polling for this topic. All right, now let us go to the topic of promoting access to healthy food. This is an issue that the city has long embraced, and now is an opportunity to refine and improve city policies and actions that can improve the health and wellness of all residents. So Hallie, if you can go ahead and launch the poll here. And I will go ahead and read the questions. We have a much shorter section here. So number one, do you have access to a nearby grocery store or farmer's market? Number two, do you have access to affordable, healthy food options, such as fruits and vegetables? Number three, do you have a need for nutritional food purchase assistance? So we have more people submitting pretty quickly. These are, I think, simpler questions to answer. Okay, we have maybe a bit of pause. It seems like some are, not as many are answering as we, oh, there we go, big jump.
We do have a really quick question for question number one.
Okay.
Somebody is asking if they also are including, if the question also includes community gardens.
I think that is a good question. And if you do have access to a community garden, I would say you could answer that yes, if the community garden does provide you with a valuable resource of healthy food. If the community garden provides perhaps a very small amount, then you may answer no, but I would encourage you to, we already have your question here. You could also submit that in the chat and we can understand better the role that community gardens would play for you. Thank you, Lynette. All right, we're getting a number of residents, and I, in all of the discussions of access to the Zoom meeting, I've been not summarizing the results so far. So far, it's a fair number of people say they have access to a grocery store or farmer's market. We have an even split on the submissions for number two about access to affordable, healthy food options. And then on number three, relatively even split, a little bit more towards the no about the need for food assistance. All right, so if there's no other questions, I will go ahead and proceed to the next section. So the next topic is the creation and maintenance of safe and sanitary housing. And as we are already updating the city's housing element, we want to know more information that will help the city add to existing programs designed to reduce health hazards and create clean and safe housing conditions. So if Hallie, you could launch there we go. So now this poll is up. The first question is, have you experienced flooding and or property damage caused by rain at your home? Number 2, do you live with conditions in your home such as mold, lead-based paint, poor ventilation, or needed repairs? Number 3, do you find it difficult communicating with your landlord and or having maintenance and repairs completed in a timely manner? And lastly, do you spend more than 50% of your income on housing costs? For example, housing payment, rent, or utilities? Yeah, people are taking the poll. Lynette, do we have any questions from people about housing, either from before or during this meeting?
In the chat room, we do not have any questions about safe and sanitary housing.
Okay. I think people are just interested in hearing more and providing the input, and I imagine we can I think share the results of these polls afterwards and kind of open the discussion. All right, we are almost up to what we had submitted last time. We'll give it another few seconds. We got some folks. So far what we're seeing is not a lot of people, but some people have experienced some flooding or property damage due to rain. We have most, fortunately, are not having to deal with conditions about such as mold or lead-based paint or others. Again, the majority of those in attendance tonight do not find it difficult to talk with the landlord. However, as we are in Southern California, a large, almost all of the attendees spend more than 50% of their income on housing costs. That is a statistic that has been increasing over the past 20 years. All right, I think we've reached the number of people who are going to take it, so I'll go ahead and end the poll and go on to the next topic. Creating more opportunities for indoor and outdoor recreation is the next topic. In parallel with the city's development of a recreation and parks master plan, we want to know how the city can improve the spaces and places around you. So Hallie, if you can go ahead and launch the poll. There we go. The first question is, do you have access to nearby parks and recreation centers? The second question, are the organized activities and sports at local parks and recreation centers available and affordable to you? The third question, do you feel safe at local parks and recreation centers? And the last question, does your neighborhood have access to bicycle lanes for travel and recreation? For those who have participated in the development of the master plan for the recreation and parks of the city, and you may have answered similar questions, do not worry, we are looking at the results of those surveys as well, but we welcome additional information, particularly from those who may not have had a chance or known about the master plan. This has been the quickest response so far. People are able, I think, to process this information and questions a lot faster. We have almost the maximum number that we had from before. Are there any questions, Lynette, either from before or in the chat so far?
We do have one question, and this might be a question that the city could help answer. The question is, how can this person obtain street lights in their street neighborhood? How can this person obtain street lighting because it's too dark?
Okay.
In their neighborhood, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and that someone from the city may be able to answer that. And it's probably related to the public facilities, but I can see where having safe areas for walking and otherwise recreating overlaps here. So if someone from the city would like to answer that, or perhaps indicate that that may be a more complicated question to answer.
Oh, hi, I got unmuted. This is Kim from the city. And yes, if you'd like to send us a separate email with your address, and then we can confer on that because it helps to know where the location is, and then we can find out what the situation, if there's a light bulb out or if there's other issues in the area. Thank you.
Okay. We have I think we've reached the limit of who's going to take the poll. So looks like most answer that they do have access to nearby parks and recreation centers. And most do have organized activities and sports at local parks, not quite as much as the first question. However, unfortunately, it looks like safety concerns are more evenly split, with one more not feeling as safe than is safe. And bike lanes are something that are lacking in almost all of the neighborhoods. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next topic. And finally, we have the topic of civic engagement, where we seek out changes to current policies and procedures to give residents a more effective voice in the process of planning, developing, and running your communities and the City of Ontario. So Hallie, if you could go ahead and launch the poll. And the first question, are you able to find or access information about decisions that the city is considering that could affect you? The second question, does the city provide information about city proposals or programs in your preferred language? Third, are you able to participate in city meetings through a communication channel, that is phone, video meeting, email, that works for you? And lastly, do you feel like you have the ability to influence public policy through communicating your position on policies and projects? These are not easy questions to answer. It's much easier to answer questions about whether or not there are nearby parks. These questions, I think, require a little bit more thought about whether or not your voice is being heard, and you could include in your perspective whether or not you think the voice of others is also being heard. Lynette, are there any questions about civic engagement that we have from earlier or from the chat? And you may be muted if you're attempting.
We do have a question from Sochi, but I'm having trouble understanding what the question is. So Sochi, if you can elaborate or provide a little bit more examples, that we can answer that question.
And to remind everyone, to make sure that we have plenty of time to address questions and make it through the information, we are taking questions primarily through the chat. So if you do have your hand raised, please go ahead and fill out or submit your question or comment in the chat. And if you're having difficulty, we can help you out. If you are wanting to know a question, then we will take that. And looks like,
Colin.
oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So regarding the question I wasn't able to understand, the person is asking if the people on the flyer will be here. Oh, the flyer said that people from Del Sol will be sponsoring this event.
To my knowledge, and the city can speak on this, to my knowledge, there may be some confusion about a flyer for this event. There was not a flyer that had Del Sol as a sponsor. This is solely a city event. So I'm not sure if the city knows about more details on what they might be doing.
So, yeah, thank you, Colin. I appreciate that. So the City of Ontario in collaboration as part of the TCC project, as an organizer for the TCC, has also worked with CHIA in order to promote this effort as part of their CHIA meeting. So El Sol has been part of this in distributing information about this web meeting. And that's where they're not sponsoring it. They were assisting us to make sure that we get the word out. So this is a city event, but we utilized El Sol as part of the outreach efforts as the city event. And it is in place of the CHIA meeting, just to make sure that we connected with everyone in the city.
Thanks, Kim. It looks like based on the answers, it looks like we're about evenly split on whether or not people feel that they can access information. Similarly, on whether or not they feel the city provides information in the preferred language. More people than not feel like they do have an ability to participate through a communication channel that works for them. But we are again split by those who feel they do or do not have an ability to influence public policy. All right, I think we can end the polling on that one. We have, I think, reached all we're going to on that. So now that we have addressed the mandatory topics, we want to hear from you about other issues that weren't mentioned or don't fit into those categories. So at this time, please add your comments and questions to the chat, and we will take questions that way. It is only 7:03 according to my clock, so we're doing very well on time, so we should have plenty of time for questions or other discussion. So Lynette or Hallie, do we have any questions coming in, or are folks more interested in seeing the results perhaps of everything?
We don't have any questions related to the topic on civic engagement.
Okay, any other questions that people have been asking from before?
Sure. Somebody had mentioned and asked, since 80%
And
of
Lynette,
the
you may need to get a little closer to the mic. I think sometimes it's cutting in and out.
Okay. Yes, somebody said in the chat, since 80% of the community is Spanish speaking, why aren't they offering this meeting in Spanish?
Okay. And I think for those who may have joined late, there is a Spanish channel that is offered here, and we can have Robert talk in a second. But additionally, this presentation is being recorded, and the Spanish version of the presentation will be available on the city's website, and on the survey, the questions will be available in both English and Spanish. So Robert, for those who maybe joined late, if you could explain about the Spanish channel.
Sure. So, sí tenemos el idioma español disponible para ustedes. Van a tener que fijarse en el menú abajo de su pantalla. Es un símbolo como se parece como el mundo. Y van a tener que hacer clic español o Spanish. Y también hacer clic Mute Original Audio para que no se oye inglés y español. También voy a repetir, hay un símbolo abajo que se parece como un mundo. Van a escoger Spanish y van a también hacer clic Mute Original Audio.
Thank you. Lynette or Hallie, are there any other questions that have come up from folks, or are we potentially going to proceed to the additional last set of questions.
Yes, somebody does want to know if the person who is translating is a certified translator.
I don't know the answer to that, but they are a professional translator with PlaceWorks and have been doing translation for numerous outreach events for us over a longer period of time, and believe that they are able to accurately translate. Okay, any other questions?
No, not yet.
Okay. And one of the reasons why we made sure that this meeting's recorded and that the materials and the slides are in English and Spanish is for that reason, so that in case people are not able to hear the audio or otherwise would like to know more information, they can get it from the materials that can be downloaded or rewatched. So now we want to take a brief moment to ask a series of questions so that we can better understand the demographics of our audience tonight. These questions are entirely voluntary and your answers will be treated as confidential. This information tells us more about who we are reaching and which part of the community is providing input. So Hallie, if you could go ahead and launch the series of demographic questions. And these should be fairly quick to fill out. Again, they are voluntary and will not be cataloged according to anyone's username or anything. They will be treated as confidential. But if I do not see people voting, then I'll assume that people are more concerned about not answering the question. So there are just 4 questions, and people, I do see some people starting to answer. The first is just asking about your age, and for each question, there is an option to not answer. So if you do feel comfortable answering some of the questions, I would encourage you to select that choice for those questions you do not feel comfortable answering. But we are starting to get people to answer these questions. So the first is about age. The second is about the race or ethnicity category that best describes you. And then the third question is about your education level. And the fourth question is about how many people live in your household. I will not report specifically what we are seeing here, but we are seeing generally a spread, a variety of answers, and that is as detailed as I will get on this. You have almost all of those who have answered other questions. I'll give it another few seconds and assume that the others are comfortable, more comfortable not answering the questions. So I think we're good here. Okay. And so now we are we've reached the part of the meeting where we're opening it up to other questions you may have. We will prioritize those about environmental justice, but can also address other questions as time permits. If you cannot type in the chat, please let us know by raising your hand. Do we have anyone on the phone?
Colleen, we do have one question on the chat.
Okay.
This person wants to know is how can they report homeless people live in their neighborhood?
I will defer to the city on answering that question. And Kim, if you are muted, there we go.
Hello. Regarding homeless individuals, I would suggest calling Community Life and Culture, and I'll put a number in the chat where you can call and just express what you're seeing in your neighborhood. So let me put the number in the chat for you. So if you wish to, you can give them a call, and hopefully that will help you move through this situation. So let me do that now. Thank you.
All right. Lynette, do you see any other questions or? Let's see, I'm not sure if you muted yourself.
No, I do not see any questions in the chat room just yet.
Okay.
We don't have any more new questions in the chat.
Okay. We will, I will say that there is more information about environmental justice on the city's website. There is what is called a story map. It's kind of like a small website or web page that you can open up, and it will walk you through some of the basics. It's something that you can share with others that's goes into a little bit more detail than what is in this presentation tonight. Again, if we have more time. If people start asking questions, we can certainly answer that. But to respect everybody's time that they are still spending with us, I want to state and ask people to please remember that tonight's meeting will be posted online for others to view, as well as a survey, so that anyone who cannot participate tonight can still provide input. That includes those who attended late or could not join at the time they desired. We would encourage other Ontario residents and stakeholders to take the survey and provide any other input to ensure the community's voice is heard. And we encourage everyone to attend our meeting next Thursday, August 5th, to discuss the issues and topics to be analyzed in the environmental impact report. Based on feedback we hear tonight and from the survey, we will be back out to present draft strategies in September and envision how to create more dynamic places in October. Please check the city's website for more info. We do have, I think, a fair amount of time available, and I know we have some folks who are looking to speak. We were concerned if we let potentially everybody speak that we would run out of time, but we have reached the point where I believe we can open up the discussion to people who wish to speak on the phone or through their computer. So I would say for Hallie or Lynette, you can go ahead. I know there's been a person who's been interested in speaking during much of the meeting. You can go ahead and allow them to speak and just announce their name and let them unmute their audio.
Before we go forward with answering the phone calls, we do have two questions that just came in.
So thank you.
One question is, how should I call Edison if a street light does not work in their neighborhood?
Kim, I will defer to you on answering that question. And you may need to unmute yourself.
For streetlights, if you could send me an email, streetlights or public works, or it could be engineering. So send me an email and then I'll let you know who owns the streetlights. The city owns most of the streetlights with exception to the intersections. So if you'd like to send it to me, kreddens@ontarioca.gov, and then I can route it to the correct individual.
Thank you, Kim. Lynette, I think there was another question.
Yeah, the next question is, since this is the first meeting, will the city send out a reminder email to people who signed up today?
A reminder email to, I guess, view the material, or for the next meeting, perhaps. I think maybe the question.
Is that, yes. So Colin, I think here the city will post on the website the schedule of the next meetings, the outreach events. We aren't sending out individual meeting notices. We're doing email blasts, not email blasts, but social media blasts as well. And if you go to our website at Ontario plan / 2050 TOP update, you can also see our schedule of events. If there's something else you're thinking of, would you let us know? If we can do outreach better, that would be great. So we're looking for opportunities to expand our outreach.
And we will be coming back out to the community in September and talking about strategies based on input we receive. And the city will be distributing emails and our social media blasts and trying to distribute through stakeholders to get people to take the survey as much as possible so we can get input that will inform that meeting. Lynette, are there any other questions before we get to the person who wishes to speak?
Yes, we do. We have one more. This person wants to know is what kind of action can the city take to fix the infrastructure on the sidewalks? I'm assuming poor infrastructure on the sidewalks.
So the city, part of this is that the city does have a improvement plan as part of our CIP. The areas that you are expressing, if you would send me an email, we do active transportation planning grants that does include sidewalk improvements as we see throughout the community and through neighborhoods. But if you'd send me an email, we can see if that's on the list or what the issue might be.
Hey, Kim, I think that question is more regarding like people are dumping their furniture on the sidewalk.
Oh, is it dumping? Okay. If it's trash, it's public services, and you can call them exactly regarding the dumping, the illegal dumping in your neighborhood. Is that correct? So we can give you the contact information to call for illegal dumping. We'll put that in the chat.
Okay. Lynette, we can, even if I think people are submitting, I don't want to leave the other person hanging on too long. I think we can probably let them speak. So if Hallie or Lynette, you want to announce that person and make sure they're elevated to panelists.
Just a moment before that, Colin, we got a request through the chat to sort of reiterate what this meeting is about and what we're trying to address here. I think a lot of people ended up joining late, so.
Okay. Let me see if it would be good to, let me go back to, I'm just going to go ahead and go back through the presentation, not all the way through the presentation. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the presentation so that people can have some material on the screen. And forgive me for the rapid amount of content on here. Okay, so the basics of why we are here tonight is to address the topic of environmental justice. There are some slides earlier that talk about the new laws that are in place that require cities to address the topic. And the basics for those who aren't already familiar of environmental justice are that there are communities that bear a disproportionate burden of pollution and associated health risks. And the concept of environmental justice seeks to address this inequity by reducing pollution and increasing public investments in these communities, while also ensuring that their input is considered in the decisions that affect them. And actually, this is the slide that talks about the law that was passed in 2016. And this is a slide that shows the requirements of the city to reduce health risks in disadvantaged communities, promote civic engagement in the decision-making process, and prioritize improvements and programs that address the needs of disadvantaged communities. These are the mandatory or minimum topics that must be addressed. And one of the reasons we're holding the meeting tonight is to understand better these issues and how they affect the residents of Ontario, as well as other local issues that might be facing you. So earlier in the meeting, we talked about defining a disadvantaged community, because that term is at the heart of environmental justice, generally described as an area with residents that face the greatest combination of pollution, health, and socioeconomic issues. And more specifically, they are areas where there are both high risks of exposure to pollution in the air, water, or soil, and residents burdened by socioeconomic and health issues. This is where the city would prioritize improvements and policy direction.
And Colin, can you
Yes.
go a little bit more into really what the end product is that was coming out of the meetings?
Yes, so more about what the environmental justice policies and actions are. Would that be correct? Or
Yeah, and what it means for the residents. We had a question asking if it meant that this would we would cause displacement, or really what the city is trying to do on this front and what it means for them.
Thank you, Hallie. Let me show you, I'm going to answer that question, and I want to have this map up and describe it real quickly so that I can use the next map to really answer that question in more detail. So we use what we have right now, which is 21 sets of data from the state that look at environmental justice issues. And the areas in orange and red on this map show areas that could be considered disadvantaged communities. The areas south of the 60, in short, are being developed and turned from agricultural uses into new homes, shops, and businesses. And that development will largely remove a lot of the factors that result in the area being identified as a potentially impacted area. Additionally, the people who currently or will live in those areas tend to have more financial resources. And so we are looking at this area shown on the map of the city as being the primary areas of focus for environmental justice policies and investment. So now let me answer more directly the question that Hallie identified. What this means is that the city must develop policies that guide city decisions, whether they be about land use, development, public investments that are supposed to improve the quality of life and remove health risks in this area. So this is, these policies are actually intended in many respects to improve existing conditions and not to simply replace or displace residents. And instead, the end result will be policies, much like the city has right now, but new policies that guide the city council, planning commission, city staff, and other agencies, and inform the public about, again, where the city makes improvements and where it chooses to make investments. A big part of environmental justice, the environmental justice law, is about prioritizing improvements to these areas. These areas, and by these areas, I mean disadvantaged communities, are often the areas that have lacked investment and been overlooked or taken for granted from many perspectives. And so this law attempts to counterbalance that and directs jurisdictions to prioritize investments into those areas. This does not mean that every area in this map becomes a priority over every other single area in the city, but on topics and in areas where the city can make additional efforts to improve existing conditions and prevent future harm, then the intended outcome is to have policies and implementation actions and programs that direct the city to make those improvements, coordinate with other agencies, work with the community to make sure that some of the health risks are reduced and that the ability to influence decision and have a voice in the development and operations of the city is increased. So if there are, I don't know if there are other questions while I have been trying to recite some of the content and purpose of tonight's meeting. And I don't know if Lynette, if you see any other questions, or Hallie.
No, I do not see any new questions in the chat, and I don't see any hands raised.
Yes, I believe the hand was taken down. So if that was on accident, please go ahead and let us know in the chat or raise your hand again. Let me go ahead and for those who did join late, I can show you a quick run through of what content was reviewed. We went over some of the local pollution issues, or local issues based on state data. We also looked at some of the regional issues based on the state data that are driven largely by facilities and operations that are outside of the city. And then we went into a series of questions to ask the audience about what issues they face. The first set was about reducing pollution exposure. The second set was about improving access to public facilities. And the third topic was about promoting access to healthy food. And the fourth topic was about creating safe and sanitary housing. The fifth topic was about increasing physical activity, opportunities for indoor and outdoor recreation. And then the last topic was about enhancing civic engagement, or ensuring that people have a stronger voice. And then we held it up for other issues. We asked a series of demographic questions. And then just as a reminder, that again, for those who perhaps joined late, there is going to be a recording of tonight's meeting posted online for others to view. You will be able to fast forward through a lot of the content that may be redundant during this meeting, so it should be an efficient way to view the content. And there's also a survey that will be posted online so that anybody who could not participate tonight, whether you joined late or were unable to attend, can still provide input. They are the exact same questions. So really, somebody who does not attend tonight will be able to view the content and provide input in the exact same manner. This information in tonight's meeting will be posted both in English and in Spanish. through the slides that we're showing tonight and in the recording. There is a Spanish channel version of this presentation that is being recorded and will be posted online. And again, the material and the survey, it will be available in English and Spanish.
Thank you, Colin. This is really important that we have all you participating. And there are a couple questions that I'm reading in the chat regarding the, I believe it's Soji regarding, I'm hoping we answered why we're doing this. The one thing that we should clear up is this is in order to, this process of updating the Ontario plan is in regards to making sure we're in compliance with state mandates. It is that. It is not about kicking people out of their homes. There is nothing related to that. Environmental justice is about environmental issues. That's what we're talking about. The survey is to understand where we can create policies to address these that better reflect the issues on the ground. So from that sense, I want to make sure this is in no intention of kicking anyone out of their houses. We do care about our air. I understand that. And then the other part of it is that we understand it's a challenging time. And there's going to be a couple challenging times coming up in the future. We have to get through this pandemic, but the city is well aware of that. We're trying to address that through better policies and better outreach so we can make sure that we can move through this time and everyone can actually flourish. So at no point in this process is it other than making sure that our land use plan and our housing element and the TOP update is in compliance with state mandates and addresses those issues. And we revisit those policies to make sure they're current policies within the Ontario plan. So I want to make sure that is something that this process is, and at no point is anyone kicked out of their house. That's not this process. So thank you.
Good clarification, Kim. For those who want to know more about what the Ontario plan is, what this process is, we do have a recording that's in both English and Spanish. That was really the first workshop. That was an overview about the process, the topics that are covered, and that video will be available on the city's website shortly, and you will be able to view that. The presentation materials are currently available on the website, and the fact sheet will be available as well.
And Colin, just as a clarification, could you speak for a moment about the housing element and about displacement, just in general, of why we're doing the update to the housing element and understanding the housing, what we have to comply with for the future. And it's about the future. It's not about that, but also about displacement and how it's envisioned as part of the housing element.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the housing element, for those who don't know, is a required part of the Ontario plan per state law. And it requires jurisdictions like Ontario to look at the existing housing needs of its residents and plan for the housing needs of future residents. That last part is probably the most well publicized aspect of the housing element. There is a term called RHNA, which stands for Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And that is a process driven by the state and regional agencies that identifies the likely future growth in the region. And for each jurisdiction like Ontario, their fair share of housing growth that they need to accommodate. Most jurisdictions need to intensify land uses in their city in order to accommodate the new growth. For Ontario, the what's called RENA number, this is the amount of growth that is anticipated over the next 8 years, is 20,000 units roughly. This is a large number, and there's obviously still a lot of land left in Ontario, and the land use plan that is being proposed reflects the need to respond to that state requirement to accommodate those 20,000 plus units. Those units are not just all market rate. The city must ensure that it has the zoning and the programming suitable to enable more affordable housing to be developed in the rest of the city. So that is one aspect, is to ensure that more housing can be developed in the city, and the housing that is affordable to lower income households, those that earn more moderate incomes, as well as some that are simply market rate housing. The other part of the housing element addresses the needs of existing residents, whether it be home improvement programs, funding for first-time home buyers who are looking to go from rental to ownership, or fair housing programs. The issue of displacement is an issue that is a part of the housing element. There is a fair housing assessment that we are conducting that augments what the city has already done in 2019 and 2020 to evaluate areas that are vulnerable to displacement and to identify strategies and programs to prevent displacement from happening. So there will be policies and programs developed in the housing element that specifically address the issue of displacement in Ontario. For those who may not know what displacement is, it is the condition where usually somebody who is often overpaying for housing, but they live in a rental complex, an apartment complex, or somewhere where they rent. It could be also a single family home. And the property owner decides that they would rather have either a higher paying tenant, or they want to redevelop the property because new development is being brought online, and it raises the price of housing throughout the neighborhood. And so what happens in some cases is that landlords see an opportunity to increase rents, which will which sometimes leads to the tenants being unable to afford paying that rent and being forced out of their housing. Even if they are able to stay in the housing, at times they will end up paying more of their income, and in many cases going from simply overpaying to severely overpaying for housing, spending 50%, 60% or more of their income for housing. So again, the housing element, which is being done in parallel with this environmental justice effort, will address the issue of displacement. And if you have any comments or questions about it, feel free to submit it, either email it to Kim or the city, or submit it through chat tonight.
Thank you, Colin.
Colin, can you address the issue of eminent domain? We have a question asking if the city will use eminent domain to accommodate growth.
I'll let the city take a first crack at that, but I can speak to it, but I will let the city speak first if it wishes.
Eminent domain has been, from the housing side of it, no longer valid, in the sense that in 2010, 11, 15, the housing authority was dissolved, which no longer allowed the opportunity or lack of opportunity to do eminent domain. In some cases, there is eminent domain, but very, very limited when it's a health and safety issue. And I believe, Colin, that's how I understand it. And that's how the city's position is. If you want to articulate further on that.
Yeah, you're correct. So what happened in earlier in the 2010s, I'm not sure how to refer to those years, but about 8 or so years ago, redevelopment law was eliminated. And that was the primary tool that jurisdictions used to apply eminent domain to force property owners to sell so that the sites could be redeveloped. So about 7 or 8 years ago, that law and the ability to do redevelopment was eliminated. And so jurisdictions right now only retain the ability to apply eminent domain when there is a health and safety hazard. So, for example, if a building has been red tagged or is falling down, then the city can step in to ensure that the safety of either the occupants or the neighborhood is not in danger.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate that as well. The other item too, we want to make sure is that the policy plan is something that we should make sure that we understand. We need to take the environmental justice information that we have and go ahead and look at it from that perspective, because the EJ, the environmental justice, gets us to implement what we need to do in the policy plan. And then the policy plan ensures that the city has the community's participation in those projects. So all of the environmental justice information that we're gathering now is going to be influencing how we develop policies that will actually be implementation as part of our implementation plan, things that we can actually focus on to make a program to instill that improvement in your neighborhood or a larger area. So for the environmental justice part of this, that's why we're gathering the information so we can craft our policies in the Ontario plan and make sure that those policies reflect what programs we want to help the community or the neighborhood in becoming more a viable place to live. So I want to make sure that we understand that this is really critical that all of you fill out the environmental justice survey that's going to be on for a whole month until August 31st to influence the policies and to give us an understanding of where implementation should be focused in the future.
And if you filled out just a handful of questions tonight and you are wondering whether or not what Kim just stated there, that you should go fill out a survey, yes, you should absolutely go fill out a survey. If we're not worried about double counting input, we want to make sure we get the input that's accurate and complete. So if you were only able to answer a handful of questions, please feel free to answer the survey that's going to be made available online. And I think I saw that Tom was raising his hand. Tom, you should be able to unmute yourself if you do have something else you would like to add, unless it was just an accidental click.
Actually, Colin, are you able to unmute Rudy as well?
He should be able to unmute, but Hallie, if you could make sure that they're able to speak. See if Alice. So Tom, you should be able to unmute. You are unmuted, Tom.
I think I'm on Tom's link because this is Rudy.
Oh,
Oh.
my mistake. Okay, no wonder it was getting confusing.
Well, and I
Okay.
didn't see it. Yeah, because when I got the link, I linked on it. So
Okay.
just wanted to say good evening to everyone, and really appreciate everybody for participating. And my name is Rudy Zollin. I'm the planning director. I think Kim and the rest of the group have done a pretty good job of trying to answer questions. But I did want to focus on the importance of environmental justice, as Kim mentioned, because I think what we wanted to do is to make sure that we hear from the community and get those policies into the plan, so that when we have projects next to sensitive uses, that we're doing the right thing in terms of communicating with the communities and making sure that that we're not having any impacts and so forth. So it's really important. In terms of eminent domain, I mean, this is just a TOP update. And so there's no eminent domain or anything proposed here. I mean, the city does at times or we do acquire certain properties like for housing, or for example, right now on Hope Boulevard, the West Valley Connector, that project is doing some right-of-way acquisitions for the the city's not doing it, but they're doing it some eminent domain to be able to get some of the right-of-way to widen it to provide for that bus rapid transit. So but I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that this is the TOP update. And this is the environmental justice is a very important component when it comes to community input, community participation, and really how the city goes forward when we have projects that are next to sensitive uses, where we have industrial projects next to residential, or we have certain type of uses that should not be allowed in certain areas. So this is very important to us. So again, just real quick, I appreciate everyone's input, and I don't want to take any more time. So I'll go back to you there, Colin.
Thanks, Rudy. So again, we will be next week conducting the scoping meeting for the environmental review. You may hear the term CEQA, stands for California Environmental Quality Act. Most people hear the term in reference to environmental impact reports, or EIRs. There is an EIR that is being conducted to evaluate the potential impacts of the land use and policy changes with the TOP effort. And that meeting will be on August 5th at 6 p.m. We will anticipate coming out to the community later in September based on the feedback that we get from the survey and the other work that we do to evaluate environmental justice issues, as well as some issues related to housing and mobility. In September, we have not yet determined that date, but we will be sending out information on that. And the fourth workshop is intended to evaluate and work with the community to understand what types of places and how to create more dynamic places in Ontario, more focused on urban design. And that meeting we anticipate happening in October.
Oh, thank you, Colin.
Mhm.
We do have one other question in regards to an airport extension, and I would have to defer to Rudy on that. I'm not aware of any airport extension. Rudy, do you have any thoughts on that?
That is correct. There's nothing no future expansions of the airport. There was a few years ago, there was talk about expansion, but with the kind of restructuring of the airport, and also the kind of the tweaking of the runways, and the way that the size of the planes that are coming in now, they're more, they're designed a little bit different. It wasn't needed to expand. However, there is some on-site airport development that's happening, with the UPS and FedEx, and those facilities are going to be expanding. And then we're also working on some multimodal projects there. But in terms of the airport, the future of it expanding, in other words, either increasing, whether it's east or west, is not. There's nothing. What I would say. there's nothing in the books that says it's going to happen. So, but if that was the case, then again, we'd be out looking for, to do a master plan for the airport, and giving everyone's input. But as it stands today, the airport is staying the size it is today. So.
Thank you, Rudy. Another question brought up by Ms. Rosario is regarding the Vista Verde project, and if their wages increase, if they'll be kicked out of Vista Verde, which is our affordable housing project as part of the Transforming Climate Communities grant. And at this time, Rosario, I'll have to defer to the TCC group on that. I don't know the metrics on it, but we will follow up with you regarding that at the next CHIA meeting, or at that meeting, as well as the next TCC trustee meeting. So thank you for that question.
And Kim, you may want to follow up too with Katrina. She may have some information on that too.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. All right. With that said, are there any other comments or questions?
I think there were a few other questions in the chat asking about what is considered affordable housing in Ontario and for the housing element. They asked if it was based on federal guidelines or something else.
Would you like me to address that, Kim?
Yes, please.
Okay. I can almost remember it off the top of my head, the exact numbers, but essentially, what is the metric used to define what is affordable is based on state income limits that are developed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development every year. They are updated on an annual basis, and they are in reference to the median income, the kind of middle point of incomes, household incomes for the county. So San Bernardino County would have an average, a median income, which I believe is about $76,000. I think that's the right number. I may be off, up or down. And that is for a household of 4. The state adjusts the income limits based on household sizes between 1 and 8. And low income housing is generally considered to be 80%, no more than 80% of that median income. So if there was a family of 4, the median income reference point would be 76,000, and 80% of that, I'm not able to do the math quite in my head. I've seen the number written a bunch of times. I think it's around 64,000, something like that. That would be the maximum income that somebody could earn with a household of 4 in order to be qualified as a low income household. Then what happens is you take that income of 64,000 and determine the maximum housing payment that that person could afford. And with some differences based on certain housing programs, most of the housing programs consider 30% of someone's household income to be the maximum affordable payment. So whether that's rent or a mortgage, you would multiply, let's say that 64,000 times 30%. And for rent, you would divide that by 12 to get the monthly rent. For affordable purchase price, it's a little more complicated. You go through some mortgage calculators to see what the maximum housing payment would be based on a mortgage and whether or not that would fall under the 30% threshold. And state housing funding, and often federal housing funding falls in line with the state housing funding, and other agency or local funding programs will limit the amount of rent or purchase price based on that affordability. So there's the low income category, which again earns a maximum of 80% of that median income of the county. And then there's very low income, where they earn a maximum of 50%, so half of the median income. There's also a third group called extremely low, would earn up to 30% of the median income. And the housing element looks to address all of those income categories. The primary kind of gap where you're reading the housing element and the expectation of the city's ability to create affordable housing is limited really by what the city has the ability to do. So in part with the loss of redevelopment funds, the city lost a lot of revenue that it could use to subsidize housing projects. So really what the city has now is the zoning tools and some ability to adjust regulations and provide some incentives to encourage the affordable and market rate housing developers to build housing that is affordable in Ontario. We're in the process of identifying ways to adjust the development standards and regulations and processes to benefit and facilitate affordable housing over market rate housing. We still have to obviously allow for market rate housing to go. And ultimately, the development of affordable housing is a decision that is really up to the property owners to sell the land or develop the land, and the development community to come in and try to build on the site. And the city's job is to understand the potential need and define the limits of what is affordable in Ontario, and to remove any governmental constraints and to really facilitate affordable housing as much as possible. And I will stop talking about housing elements because otherwise I will talk for another 2 hours.
Yes, thank you, Colin. No, appreciate it. The clarification, and hopefully that helped. It's not an easy calculation by any means on our end, but we're trying our best to make it equitable in all facets.
We do have a kind of a housing 101
Mhm.
set of information on the website that you can go visit. And it walks through some of this information.
Okay.
do-
Go ahead, Holly.
I was just
there
going to say we have one last question that I see hasn't been answered yet, but I can let you finish, Kim.
Oh, no, I was
was.
just, any last questions? I was going to ask, we're coming up on 8 o'clock.
Right. One last question I see in the chat is, are more warehouses going to be part of the Ontario plan?
At this time, we're having warehousing as a level to the very southern portion of the city of Ontario. And that at this time is what we're envisioning for warehousing to the future. And you can also go on our website and look at the land use plan scenario to see where warehousing is located throughout the city.
Or the categories that would allow for
Allow warehousing, yes. Any other calls or questions?
There's one question in the chat, but I'm not sure I understand what they're referring to. They say people are referring to it as an expansion, but there is a project.
I'm not sure what that is in reference to. So
Right.
if there is,
That was in reference to the topic about the airport expansion.
okay, and
The airport project, yeah.
okay, and I believe that was Rudy addressed that
Yes,
at this
yes.
time. Okay, fantastic. And then I see
But
one.
there, hey, Kim.
Oh, go ahead. Yes,
Sorry.
sir.
And I think there may be some confusion too. There is just to the I guess it would be the east of Haven Avenue. There is property that is owned by the airport that I believe is for sale, and there will be industrial will be built there in the future, and that is zoned industrial today. So that may be where some of that expansion of the airport's coming from. The airport's not really expanding. They have property that's been owned there where the kind of haven there on the west side where the runway comes in. There's properties there that are industrial that the airport has and is going to actually there's an RFP out there, I believe now for for the development of those for industrial, which is currently zoned industrial now. So that might be
Okay.
some of the confusion where people are saying expansion of the airport, I think.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, thank you so much. Oh, I would just see, is there anything else? Okay. With that, thank you for your participation. We appreciate your time. I know it's a busy week, as all weeks are, but we want to make sure that you stay connected with us. Please go to our website and get updates on new infrastructure. We're having an infrastructure informational piece going to be put up. We have the environmental justice, we call them story maps, up to get more educated in that area, as well as the housing element. And then for next steps, we're going to take in all this information. The survey is on our website as well. So please reach out to folks and let them know the survey is online for the environmental justice survey. The more information we receive from our citizens, the better we are as a whole community. So please feel free to send the word out to have folks participate in that survey as well. With that said, over the next couple months, we're going to start the environmental process with the CEQA scoping meeting going to be held on August 5th at 6 p.m. And that will specifically talk about the CEQA compliance that we need to go through in order to have this project approved, the Ontario plan approved. With that, once again, thank you so much for your time. Please email or call myself or Tom Braun if you have any questions or concerns. And please participate wherever you can, and we'll make sure we get the word out to you for future workshops. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and have a great evening and stay safe. Thank you very much.